as we look ahead to what comes after this Juneteenth, how much progress do we have still to go?
Oh, quite a bit. Unfortunately, there's some of the same vestiges that had initially been a problem in America had not been redressed or resolved. If you think of 159 years later from Juneteenth of 1865, we also have to think of 1619 to 1865, 246 years of the absolute institution of slavery, of Americans being kidnapped, robbed, raped, being denied the opportunity for education. It was a horrible period in our history. And so from 1865, if you will, up until 1896, there was the Reconstruction period. And there we saw progress, people moving forward. And then the winds turned backwards after the Justice Taney decision and the separate but of the laws of Plessy versus Ferguson, where there was the segregation that went into place. It took 58 years up until 1954 to overturn those black codes, those Jim Crow laws, and inch by inch it moved forward until we saw the culmination of an African-American president and that of President Barack Obama. But now we see some of those same forces moving the hands of time backwards when we see the restriction on voting right access, when we see the banning of African-American books in Florida, when we see the challenges to the voting laws. So America takes 2 steps forward. Sometimes it takes a step backwards, but there's an ongoing quest for freedom to move forward and have progress.
Well, Congressman, I want to ask you about what steps were taken here in this campaign cycle that we're in right now, because as you know, there is a massive effort by both the Biden campaign and now the Trump campaign to seize on the black vote. It may well make the difference in this campaign. It's going to be awfully close. And this past weekend, Donald Trump spoke at a campaign event roundtable in Detroit, of course, the key state of Michigan here. And he said this on the impact that he's had on the lives of black Americans. Let's listen.
We've done more for, and I say this, I say it proudly, more for the black population than any president since Abraham Lincoln. That's a big statement. And crooked Joe Biden has done nothing for you except talk. It's only talk. It's all talk.
Congressman Jackson, how would you respond to Donald Trump?
Well, I wish we could have finished the clip and maybe he could have given some details and brought to light what he's done. I'm not quite sure what he was talking about. Oftentimes he can say things that aren't challenged and certainly aren't substantiated. And he certainly cannot compare his record for achievements and improvements.
Well, he says he will win the black vote in this campaign. Do you believe him?
No, I don't. And I don't think many people should believe him from courts, and other people should not believe what he's saying. But if you think about it, so if you think about when he says he's delivered more to the African American community, President Joe Biden nominated and had put in place for the United States Supreme Court the first woman of color, the first African American woman, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. President Trump didn't do that. President Joe Biden has had more African Americans in his cabinet than anyone else in American history. President Trump did not do that. So there are many things that President Trump is claiming and extolling that simply just aren't true. So I would appreciate if people in the media would challenge him. So what exactly that he's done? What he has done is he's called countries in Africa S-hole countries. What he has done is 35 years ago when I was a teenager, lied and asked for the death penalty on 5 teenage African-American boys and still said they're guilty even after the courts have found them innocent, and doesn't have the temerity or the guts or the compassion to even ask for their apology after those men had spent that time in jail. I mean, so I'm not exactly sure, and I would like for him to respond to it. It was Congresswoman Alma Adams of North Carolina that had introduced and passed the legislation for increased funding for historically black colleges and universities. So yes, I would like for him to expound upon what he's done for the African American community.
Well, what would you say, not to us in the media who ask questions of Donald Trump or his policies, but to black voters who are actually telling pollsters, or at least indicating that they aren't enthusiastic about voting for Joe Biden. What would you tell them about why they should?
Well, I would say that elections have consequences, and we may not get everything that we want in one candidate, but measure the cost. And I would tell people to measure twice and cut once. What's on the line is the Supreme Court. This next president can have the opportunity to appoint 2 United States Supreme Court justices. These laws live for centuries that we have to still challenge and still work through. If you think of what's on the line, is that President Trump in office has been very, very reckless. When you start closing the doors on Muslims and saying that they cannot come here, when you start turning your back on Haiti, when you start calling African countries out of their name, that is very, very mean-spirited. When you look and see what he's done in his early part of his career in housing in the city of New York, in Queens, where he fought against having African Americans to be renters. I mean, has he ever contracted and worked with African Americans? Even on his television show of The Apprentice, African Americans that were qualified were disqualified because he was seeking polls. So poll ratings and approval, as opposed to having character and the gumption and the will to do what was right. So I've not seen him stand up to the face of those persons that have tried to be vile and offensive to African Americans. I've not seen him to be a leader in any of these categories. So as it relates to the African American polls, there's a lot of conversations going on. I applaud Trump for going into the church. I don't know why he was, who sent the invitation. I don't know how many people he had there that were actors, but I don't see that groundswell for him receiving overwhelming support in the African American community.
Congressman, I apologize. We're almost out of time, but I want to get to an important matter we talked about last time you were here. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is not about to get a vote, it seems, in Congress once again, but the Farm Bill is something you're working on right now. Is that the next best opportunity that you have as a legislator to help people of color when it comes to food stamps, the SNAP program?
Well, absolutely. And I would tell you that by pure numerical purposes, that there are more whites that are beneficiaries of food stamps than African Americans. If you look at SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, 42 million Americans rely upon it, and that's for $2 per meal. Where can you get a meal for $2? And it's absolutely supplemental nutrition. So there is malnourishment growing in the United States of America. If we don't have it, you're talking about 18 million people that are falling further into malnourishment. And what is the cost of that? That comes up in Medicaid, Medicare, that comes up in brain development, that comes up in life expectancy. So we absolutely have to fully fund the SNAP program